I'm Mason Mount. You're listening to the London is Blue podcast.
Okay, continuing on in the lineup, we've got Kurt, Happy, Zouma. I gave him a 6. Dan with a 7. Nick refused to rate him, and Phil gave him a 7. Phil, 7 for big Happy Kurt Zouma. I guess what stood out to you with his season? I mean, he ended up being one of the more used center backs in a merry-go-round of lineups this season.
Yeah, and the results when he was in the team were markedly improved. I think this one really has to be in a bubble by itself. When you look at Chelsea centre-backs this season, he came into the team and offered a defensive presence that none of the others really provided. At his best, he is a see-it, clear-it defender. He's a penalty box presence. He can head the ball. He doesn't mess around with trying to clear it, as we're all familiar with. He's happy to just slam the ball as far away as possible. And sometimes you need to do that. He's not without his flaws. The Aubameyang goal in the cup final is a very good example of that. He got his body shape all wrong. And he's very renowned for his recovery skills. We see them frequently. He loves a slide tackle, but it's often because he's quite out of position that he needs to use his athleticism to get back and make those tackles. So I don't necessarily think he's the perfect solution, but in terms of this season, he was comfortably Chelsea's best centre-half.
I have now put a rating of a 7 in just so that the people understand where I'm coming from. I think it was hard. Like when we talk about center backs this year, and we'll talk about all of them on this show. It's hard to get a pure rating on them because of all the rotation and partnerships that we've talked about in the past. So this is very much, as Phil said, in a bubble. I think he's the guy at the end of the season, Dan, that we look to help shut up shop, and that didn't always work. But he was the one guy who seemed reliable enough to help do that. And so I'm inclined to lean a little bit more positively, even though he had a rough start to the season.
Yeah, and I think actually there were a couple of scenarios too where people have called out things like his passing and maybe his comfort on the ball, which is not what I'm looking for first when I'm looking for a central defender. I want someone who's going to be a little bit more aerially dominant, which he was the best in the air out of our defenders. He was, as Phil alluded to, one who was getting things out of the box, making clearances, trying to find a way to just not allow us to be under threat, which we were at times. And so, coming from a season on loan in Everton, coming back into our side and having actually some stats that were better than his year at Everton, that was nice to see. So very happy that Kurt, I think, has put himself in a pole position here, Brandon, to be our number 2 next season if we bring someone in as a number 1 center back choice.
Yeah, we have to remember that while we all like Zouma, he got absolutely frozen against Aubameyang. Again, a great center forward, but he's not the standard, the level. It needs to be much higher. He may have had a good season for Chelsea in context, but overall, it was not where it needs to be. We like to think he has room to continue to grow, and like I said, he needs to be number 2. But we definitely need to elevate all center backs across the line. So next up, let's go to another center back, Andreas Christensen, and then we can kind of get to our outside backs from there. 5s, and then Phil gave him a 6. Phil, is that just because you like the way he passes the ball?
It's clearly because he's an academy graduate.
Classic. He gets the +1 bonus.
I think
The bonus point.
We know what went wrong with Aspilicueta. Sorry, we know what went wrong with Christensen. He lacks physicality. He lacks confidence sometimes. But I also think that there's always a pile on when things go wrong with him, and we forget he's steady, middle of the road, absolutely nothing wrong performances. He was also Frank trusted him in most of the big matches against the big teams this season, rightly or wrongly. He played very well against Manchester City because City didn't play with a recognised centre forward in that match. He didn't have anybody going up picking on him 1v1, and there are certain matches throughout the season where Christensen will be an asset in the defence. It's just like we were talking about with Zouma, he's not necessarily made to be the first choice every single week. I think he's demonstrated under Antonio Conte and previously before that on loan in Germany that his best position is in the middle of a back three, where he has a little bit more playmaking responsibility and sweeping responsibility rather than having to be the first line of a physical defense. I don't think he had a good season, but I don't think he's as bad as was made out when everybody saw his name on the team sheet and started fretting that mistakes were imminent.
Yeah, he definitely had some big performances throughout the season. Also, not so many. Continued to have injuries again. So we're, 26 appearances a season, or 90s a season. You want to see from a center back reliability as well. So it's not all his fault, but again, this season from a center backs, I've kind of said it in our circles. It just needs to be wiped away, and the expectations come next season. Doesn't matter what you did last season, because that was the worst. We're all coming in and elevating as well. And he's in that boat. We need to see something big. Otherwise, I really don't see Chelsea keeping him beyond next season if there's no significant rise to what he has to offer.